quality of lifers. I just wanted to give a quick shout out to you guys before we dive into today's show. So thank you to all of you who have been following us since our launch in February. We've only been going for a month and a half. More and more people are really subscribing to the podcast daily, and we're gaining an international presence. We're also creeping up the charts on iTunes, which is really exciting. And we're now available for Android users on Google Play. And you can also find our interviews on the Autism Quality of Life YouTube channel. So with that, let's get into today's episode, which is perfect timing given that we're in the middle of April, which is Autism Awareness Month. Today's guest works for a premier autism agency in the United States and has an enormous amount of knowledge and resources to share with us. I think you'll want to grab a pen and paper for this episode. If you're driving on the treadmill or elsewhere and can't pick up a pen right now, don't worry, because you can always view the show notes from today's episode on our website to find the links of everything that we discuss. The show notes for today's episode can be found at www.autismqualityoflife.com/autism-innovators. So without further ado, here's the interview with myself and Dave Kearon, Director of Adult Services at Autism Speaks.
It sounds crazy, but we're not that far away from self-driving cars, and how much of a difference this could make for the disability community.
So today I have with me Dave Kearon of Autism Speaks. As the Director of Adult Services at Autism Speaks, Dave manages the organization's mission to promote solutions for individuals across the autism spectrum and throughout the lifespan. He works to increase the quality and quantity of opportunities and resources available to adults with autism pertaining to employment, housing and residential supports, post-secondary education, and community integration. Prior to joining the Adult Services team, Dave worked at Autism Speaks in the role of psychometrician for the Autism Genetic Resource Exchange. In that position, he visited children and families across the United States collecting clinical data. Dave, hi. How are you doing today?
Hey, Terry. I'm doing well. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well also. Thanks so much for joining me. I'm really excited to learn more about the work you're doing and hear about adult services over at Autism Speaks.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for doing this podcast on such an important topic.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Yeah, so could you tell us more about you and your connection to autism?
My background was in school psychology, so I was working out of college, as a psych degree, psych major, and didn't know what to do with myself, really. I didn't have any personal connection to autism at the time. And I thought I might become a school psychologist or a school social worker. So I started working in the local public schools where I live. And I worked with mostly transition-age students. And then I started meeting more and more students with autism. It fascinated me. I was hooked. And I've made some really kind of deep personal connections with some of those children at the time, but now young adults, and I still see them today, and very close relationships with their families. So I kind of became fascinated by autism and by people with autism. And my training that I was receiving in graduate school for school psychology actually kind of prepared me for some clinical work and some clinical research. And that's where I was able to make the jump onto Autism Speaks and the AGREE project. Really briefly, what AGREE was doing at the time, a very large database of all of this clinical and biological information. So we drew blood from these families, and we took 2 days of clinical data, ADOS and ADI, and IQ testing and all sorts of things. And we stored all that information for researchers to use. So hopefully we would save them years and years and millions of dollars, and they can access this information that way. This past week, kind of the next iteration of that database is now called Missing. And it's partnership now with Google. Google makes all this information available via their cloud technology to researchers around the world. And the goal now actually is to fully map 10,000 full human genomes of individuals with autism. And they're identifying different biomarkers and genetic information that can help us maybe develop more personalized treatments for what looks to be the types of autism. So that was kind of my introduction to Autism Speaks and the research side, and then opened up a new opportunity because Autism Speaks up to that point has really been focused much more on raising awareness of autism and what it is, and advocating for better services in the schools. And they did a tremendous job, but they hadn't really addressed what happens next after school ends. So they began their adult services initiative, and I was able to kind of make the jump at that time.
That's awesome. Okay. So you got your start in the AGREE program, and so you moved into adult services. Can you tell us now, so Autism Speaks is really focused on a number of projects and initiatives, and it really begins more in the middle school and high school years, right? So thinking about that transition period and trying to prepare these individuals at an earlier age and thinking about adulthood. Can you speak to some of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. You're right. So we consider transition to be part of our adult services. And the reason for that is we know that a more effective transition process, starting as young as 12, 13, in many ways, we should start looking at this when the child is in kindergarten. But, when they're 12 or 13, certainly by the time they're 16, and it's federally mandated by the IDEA that a transition plan is created, if that is a more effective process and we know a little bit more about what best practices are in those transition years when school funding is still available and more supports are available, the outcomes in young adulthood and later in adulthood are much, much more positive. So, there's a huge kind of leverage point there that we really need to be taking more advantage of while these students are still under their educational entitlement or when they're still in school. So for us, it really begins in those transition years, middle school and high school, and building a plan, hopefully led by the student. Best practice here is really telling us that the student needs to have a more active role in planning their own transition to whatever capacity they have, right? So some students are obviously they're going to be more disabled or more able than others. But at whatever level they are at, they should be invited to be part of or leading that transition process and planning process. And, just like we do with other students without autism, we want to ask them and their parents, what is their goal? Where do they want to be the young adults and into adulthood? And so that includes things like, where would they want to live and with whom? Do they want to live on their own or with roommates or do they want to live with dad? Do they want to work out of the house and full time, or is it more reasonable and more in line with their skills and abilities that really want to shoot for is a part-time job or just a volunteer position? Is college in their future, or is it maybe something more like a life skills program? So you kind of want to start with that end goal and then work backwards and work with the school team on developing the plan to help them reach those goals. So the transition process is so crucial.
Yeah. So that's a really great tip there. So starting with the end goals and then working your way backwards.
Absolutely. And that can help you. I mean, the biggest challenge really that happens is when school ends, in many cases at age 21, or if the child does graduate at, say, 18, is in most cases for people with autism, they are totally disconnected at that point from work, from college or other school programs, from their community. So in most cases, in too many cases, I should say, the young adult with autism is back at home and mom and dad is on the couch, not working, not going to school. So the most important part maybe of that transition process, beyond the goal, defining the goal and where you want to be, is identifying who in your community can provide services to help you reach those goals and who can provide, employment support services or independent living services or transportation, all the pieces that need to be put together. And that takes a long time and a lot of work. So you don't want to be thinking about that the day after graduation.
Yeah. So let's pick one of those areas. How about employment? So thinking about an individual who's getting closer to graduating high school and they might be looking for a part-time or full-time job down the road and aren't really sure where to start or what to do. Do you have any recommended resources or ideas of different directions they might consider? Yeah,
I mean, the good news is more and more resources, especially on employment, are being developed every year. So we have some of our own at Autism Speaks. There's a lot of others out there. I mean, one that or two that I should mention that are really pretty innovative and interesting. are one called Sidekicks.
Okay.
And this was developed by a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, Ron Suskind. So Ron has a son, I think named Owen. These two were just nominated for an Oscar for a documentary about Owen and his real intense interest in Disney characters and Disney movies that actually taught him how to speak.
Ah.
Owen is a person with autism.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Ron recognized was, Owen was so motivated by his special interest in Disney characters that it unlocked this hidden potential that was in him for all along. And so what Sidekicks is an app that Ron and his team have developed that helps students with autism and others, I should add, identify those like special interests and skills, and then help to kind of identify career paths and workplaces and industries that may be a good fit for them.
Oh.
So that's one way to kind of go about it. And then a similar one is a group called Identifor. And the founder of Identifor is a man named Con Do, a really brilliant guy, and has a terrific team that he's put together that's done some work with Autism Speaks.
Okay.
Identifor uses another kind of innovative way to assess a person with autism's interests and skills and kind of help develop a profile that could point them in the right direction as far as a career path or industry to explore further. And there's a lot of based on games. So it's not a cut and dry assessment like you and I may have taken in like high school that gives you a report like, oh, you were, 80% that you might become a lawyer and, whatever else they tell you. And it's really hardly ever accurate. These are based on game plays that the students do. It's fun, and it kind of produces a profile that can help them identify some of those different things that they may end up doing.
Nice.
I want to mention, one that we have. It's not an assessment like that, but it's a tool to kind of see what jobs are out there. So we have a new website called thespectrumcareers.com. And you have to type in the THE, so thespectrumcareers.com.
Okay.
It's a free website. It was developed by terrific partners of ours called Wrangham Consultants. They're a staffing company. So they really knew how to do kind of the staffing side that we didn't have any expertise in. And they helped us create this website. It was the lead developer on the website was a young man with autism. And it was designed to be a jobs like Monster.com or Hot Jobs or any of the other ones, but it's by and for people with autism.
That's great.
So people with autism can upload their resumes the traditional way if they choose. They can upload a Word document or a PDF, or they can upload a video resume or photo resume instead of just telling one on paper. You can show what you're capable of. You can upload photos and images of work you've done in school or at their jobs to really show your ability. And likewise, on the other side, employers can post jobs in a traditional way, like a PDF, or they can show video of the workplace. We're really encouraging businesses to do this. We haven't had so much success yet, but we think it's so important that if a business can show a person with autism, this is the kind of work environment you'd be coming into. It's either really loud and busy, or it's a hot warehouse with a lot of activity, or it's a super quiet cubicle where no one's really talking to each other. That's super helpful information especially for people with autism. It would be helpful for you and me too, to be honest, to know about that stuff before walking in, but especially for people with autism who may have like sensory sensitivities.
Oh yeah. Posting
their resumes and looking for jobs. We have businesses who are posting their open positions. And the third user that group is service providers. So from around the country, as of today, we have about 400 who are registered, and we're getting more every day. So those are the job coaches and support employment agencies, so that whether the person with autism or the business wants some extra help in this process, they can find someone locally, because it's not something that Autism Speaks can provide. So we want to partner with all of those local organizations. So that's one tool. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's just, it could just be part of a person's kind of job search beginning, and to see what companies are out there and who's expressed an interest in hiring people with autism.
Yeah, definitely a resource to look into. That's great. So thespectrumcareers.com. Okay, and just to backtrack really quick.
And it's should have mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to mention that it's free. It's free for everybody, and that's the case for all of our resources. Yeah, so it doesn't cost the business to post a job, and of course, it never costs the person with autism to register.
Oh, good, awesome. Okay, that's really good to know. Yeah, I was just going to ask you the Identicore assessments that you were talking about. Is that an app too, or is there a website?
Yeah, they have their own website. They have their own website, and I think they do have an app also, but I'm just pulling it up right, make sure I have it right.
Okay.
Identifor.com. It's IDENTIFOR. And that was they have like an avatar that speaks to you named Abby. It's a very cool group. It does a lot of interesting things with technology, all geared towards autism. So I encourage you to check it out.
Nice. Okay. And all of these resources will go into the show notes so people can access them there.
Terrific. While we're talking about kind of these different resources, can I tell you about another project that we're doing related to employment at Autism Speaks? Of
course.
Great, thanks. So this one's really geared towards big businesses, and it's called ADVICE. ADVICE is a long, kind of clunky acronym. It stands for Autism and Disability Visual Integration Company Experience. So it's a consultancy group that Autism Speaks and two funding partners of ours, the New York Collaborates for Autism and the Poses Family Foundation. We've gotten together to fund this group of consultants who are all autism experts with corporate experience, large companies to help them develop kind of system-wide autism hiring initiatives. It does cost some money to the companies. Our Funders Collaborative is what we call ourselves, funds half of the cost of the project, and we ask companies to miss halfway. So they have to pay for half of the cost of the consulting as well. And the first several companies are up and running. As of January, kind of we were able to make the announcement. Yeah, so it's kind of new and exciting. The first two companies in were Cintas, which produces, I guess they used to call themselves anyway, the uniform company. They produce most of the uniforms worn in like corporate America. They also do a lot of first aid kits and all sorts of other kind of tools that are used in the workplace.
Nice.
It's a very big company. It's been really great working with veterans over the years. They've just shown a terrific commitment to the veteran community. And the exciting news is that they're really turning that into something a little broader to include people with autism and other disabilities too. So as of this year, by the end of this year, they will be actively hiring people with autism at 80 of their sites throughout the country.
Wow.
Thanks to their work with the ADVICE program. So look up Cintas, CINTAS. It's a really cool company that we've just been so excited to work with through ADVICE. The ADVICE website, by the way, you want to see kind of a little bit more about how they work. It's led by a man named James Emmett, who's kind of really well known in the field. And that's www.autism-advice.org. And so Cintas was the first. The second company that's in is Staples.
Okay.
You know, everyone kind of knows Staples. They're not yet working with the stores, but they are working with Staples distribution centers. So they're looking to hire people with autism through the distribution centers. The newest company that just joined is Quest Diagnostics, where you may have blood work done, other kind of lab work and drug testing for employment is done there. Have thousands of sites throughout the country. And they are now working with us and ADVICE to hire people with autism. So I just wanted you to know about ADVICE, because even though it's not really a place for people with autism who are seeking employment to turn to, I wanted you to know that this group is working with some really big companies that are in hundreds or thousands of communities throughout the country. So we're hoping to build this capacity, over the next several years.
That's really exciting. Yeah. And James is actually a future guest on the podcast as well, so maybe we'll learn a bit more about ADVICE from him. Oh, you will. James is an absolute all-star. We're really lucky to be working with him. And a big reason why we decided to do this initiative and help fund it with our partners is there's not enough people like James out there to have the experience and the autism expertise. So
our deal with James was to, fund his work, these new companies, but also ask him to train new people to do what he does, to train people to become autism consultants. That's what he's doing.
Yeah. To pass along his knowledge. That's great.
Exactly. We need to grow that field, because more and more companies are interested in the strengths of people with autism. They really are finally starting to, I think, recognize all that people with autism have to offer their companies. It's not about charity. This is so important when we talk to companies, Terry, that we're not making an appeal to their better nature and asking them to do what's right. That doesn't really last. What has to be understood by the company is that people with autism are going to be really good for their business. And they're starting to recognize that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Great. Okay, well, those are really exciting resources. Thanks so much for sharing about that. Should we move on to a different area? So maybe housing and dive into that a bit?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I will say right at the outset that, while employment is exciting and has lots of things going on that are really promising, housing is a whole other animal. In my opinion, it's a lot harder and a lot more expensive. And there's been a lot of challenges. So, I can tell you a little bit about what we've done.
Okay.
We've done a little less because part of our issue is actually with some questions about federal rules around what is going to be funded by Medicaid. So Medicaid is going to be the biggest funder of with the home and community-based services that fund a lot of the supports that allow someone to live in their home independently or live in a group home and get services. The big questions right now are about what they call settings rules. So there's been a movement over the last several generations that's been really important and has been absolutely the right way to go, where people are moving out of institutions. They were, housing too many people with autism and other disabilities all in one place, not providing them with individualized services. There was rampant abuse and just terrible things happening. So they've been moving these folks out into the community, and now the question has become people who want to live in large groups. So there's a group of like 20 people with autism, for instance, who want to live on a farmstead. This is a very common idea that our families have. A farmstead where they could, raise livestock and crops and live, somewhat independently off of the things they produce on the farm and that they're able to sell to their community. What a wonderful idea, and many people with autism would choose to live there. Problems we're seeing now is questions about, is that going to be considered congregate living or basically too much like an institution? If it's only for people with disabilities, is it really an inclusive living place? So we're kind of in a holding pattern right now where people have all these amazing ideas for communities and for different types of housing, but they're not sure what's going to qualify for funding. And so things are kind of being held up. One of our ways to try and spur some innovation was last year we hosted what we called the House to Home Prize. So it was an innovation prize that we've seen like tech groups do a lot of, where we had $150,000 in prize money, $50,000 to 3 different winners to come up with something new and innovative that can serve more people with autism and help them live independently. And we broke it up actually into 3 different categories. It had to be a solution. One solution, winning solution would be for people who, are more impacted 24/7 round-the-clock care. And then kind of a middle-of-the-road group that maybe needed daily supervision or daily supports. And then the other group that maybe just more occasional supports, weekly check-ins, that kind of thing. And we did have some really cool ideas that came in. We had something like 80 different countries, and it was really cool to see kind of the different groups that were part of it and the innovation, a lot of technology. So that's what I'm excited about with housing is the innovation on the technology side and how can we use technology to help serve more people with less money. That's basically the challenge we have, right? If we talk about Medicaid being the major funder of this stuff, you never hear political discussions about how can we increase Medicaid funds. It's always about how to cap them or to reduce payments. So we need to be able to serve a growing number of people with autism and other disabilities with shrinking funds. So, I have a couple of pieces of technology that I can tell you about.
I was just going to ask you.
Yeah, I mean, so one of them, and this was one of the winners of the contest. It's called Neighborhood Network, and it was developed out of a group called Community Living Options at Kansas University.
Okay.
More or less using smart home technology. So, you've seen probably a lot of commercials for this stuff where, smart home technology where we can kind of set up your home now with your thermostat. You kind of know when you come and go and can adjust the temperature appropriately to save you some money and save energy. You can lock the door from work if you realize you had forgotten to do that on your way out the door. You can turn lights on from your cell phone. You can take a look on your video if you have cameras in the house and check in on your child with their nanny or something. So kind of using those technologies to support people with autism so that you don't necessarily need a support person by their side 24 hours a day. You may be able to provide much of that support over the phone and over interactive, tablets and television sets and things like that. So we're seeing this kind of neighborhood network, as they call it, where one person can now maybe support a group of 20 to 30 individuals, and they can send support in person as needed, but not necessarily to be there 24 hours a day. So those are some of the solutions that we're seeing. Also, a number of apps that we're trying to help. These folks are going to need roommates if they're going to find a place to live. It'll probably be like many millennials. It's going to need to be a group, an apartment or a small home with a number of individuals all paying rent. So how can we find one another and match people up based on their interests and based on their age and their gender and maybe their level of, their abilities. So apps to kind of help connect people that way. Right. So there's a lot happening kind of, I would say, like around the fringes, around housing. That is kind of exciting.
Yeah, all of this technology and apps, and it's going to come together to really be able to create a full life for these individuals.
Yeah, and that's such an important part of it. It's not really so much about the bricks and the mortar, of the size of the house or how many rooms. The really important part of housing and residential supports is the community and the connection to the community. Do they have access to their wider community, to their neighbors,
exactly,
to recreation and education and work and whatever they want to do? Those are the important parts. You nailed it.
Yeah, so you just spurred off an important topic as well, transportation. So you got me thinking. We were talking about access. So I know that's a topic for many families that they might struggle with. Parents are constantly driving their transitioning age and adult children from one activity to another, to and from work. They kind of just become the carpoolers for indefinitely. Do you foresee any solutions to the transportation crisis?
Well, I don't know if I see any great solutions. I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges, actually, when you talk about especially employment. We've heard it from way too many people and from way too many businesses that, I found the best fit for my son or for myself. I just couldn't get there every day because Access-a-Ride or whatever public transportation service for people with disabilities in that community is completely unreliable. I mean, that's the case almost everywhere. It's so frustrating.
Yeah, I know. We need the next Uber for autism.
Well, yeah. Well, so that's what I was going to say. So there is movement, not necessarily around autism, but right. I mean, Uber and Lyft and whatever, all of those kinds of ideas can be something that we can adapt and make sure that they're providing some service to people with disabilities. They're probably better able to provide it. So, I think it just may be a matter of time before we see new solutions there. There's also, people talk about, it sounds crazy, but we're not that far away from self-driving cars and how much of a difference this could make for the disability community.
Yeah.
I mean, we're really, we're really not too far away. And, it sounds really scary and strange and sci-fi, but it's going to be here in the next 5-10 years, I don't know how widely available it will be, but that technology is coming. The other thing is what some people call clusters. So developing affordable housing along major transportation routes where access to the community and to employment opportunities is part of the development. So, there's a couple of examples, and this obviously makes a lot of sense. I think people probably think, well, of course you'd want to do that. But we haven't seen that done that much for people with autism and for disability communities. So we have to really make sure that service providers and families of people with autism are talking with developers of these projects about these important aspects of independent living. They need to have access to a train or a bus line at least. So we've seen new ones that are popping up. There's one that's a great model out in Arizona called First Place.
Yeah.
So First Place is being built, the light rail or something. It's in that part of Arizona.
Oh, okay.
So that was like the first part. The first part of their project was to determine where they're going to build, and let's find a place along the light rail line. I mean, that's what we're going to have to do to make sure these folks are really connected, because transportation is that much of a barrier right now.
Yeah, that's a really important point.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, we mentioned so much technology before. I've spoken with a number of researchers now who are looking into different ways to help people with autism learn how to drive. Many people, especially what maybe we used to call Asperger's, right, are fully cognitively capable of driving, but they have a lot of anxiety in many cases, or people are worried about their social deficits actually impacting how safely they drive and how they can predict things unfolding. So what these researchers have been developing is virtual reality driving education. So you're in what feels like a car, it looks like you're looking at the windshield, and you can practice as many times as you need. And they're testing this with students with autism. And I think it's beginning to show that more people with autism who never thought they could drive, and for parents who never even considered their children as candidates to get a license, may have been wrong. Maybe that they are able to just need a different kind of education. So that's something else to consider.
Wow. Do you know if those types of virtual reality programs are available more publicly at this point, or if they're still just in research studies?
As far as I know, they're just being used in research studies. And I can't recall off the top of my head, Terry, right now which universities they're at. But I can. What I'll do is after we're done, I'll send you include them, and people can contact the labs if they want to know more about them.
Great. Yeah. Perfect. Thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Virtual reality-based programs for driving. I've also heard of some programs in the works so that individuals can practice interview skills and job preparations. Are you familiar with any of those types of programs?
Yeah, I am. Yeah, it's really cool. Like we mentioned the self-driving cars, and now we're talking about virtual reality. Like it's really, virtual reality and also artificial intelligence. I mean, these are all being used now and in different ways, and people are starting to look for ways that it can help people with autism. It's just really cool. So these job interview tools do work. I believe one of them is being used at the Dan Marino. That's a transition program for young adults with autism.
Okay.
The interviewer can actually be set on like different modes. So the interviewer can be someone who's having a really bad day and is kind of a jerk and is really short with you. So you can kind of practice dealing with someone with that kind of personality. They have some ability to learn, so like they can really respond to your answers in a natural way and give the person with autism an opportunity to learn by doing. I mean, this is like the most important part. That's kind of the common theme. Transition, employment, all this stuff. People with autism, in general, it's not the case for everybody, but they really tend to learn better by doing, not by traditional instruction in a classroom setting. So to give them actual experience with practice interviews is the best way for them to get better at that. The other side is a really important part to making sure people with autism have a fair shake in interviews is to help companies rethink the way they're interviewing and the reasons why they're interviewing. Because to ask someone with autism, with by definition, they have deficits in social interaction and communication skills. To ask them to do a face-to-face interview,
right,
which only tests those skills, is not really fair. It's an accurate assessment of their skills and abilities. So I kind of have like mixed feelings about some of these things to help improve interview skills, because I think the more important thing to do, honestly, is to convince these companies to drop the traditional interview and use better ways to assess people's skills.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
It's hard to convince a large institution, like a big business, to change those kinds of practices. It'll take a long time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's the way it's always been done. But so using more techniques, such as on-the-job rehearsing and through video of what the job entails, those are all really great ways to help individuals interview as well.
Exactly. I think like one example I use a lot is, if you're hiring someone to be a software tester, and this a great company based out of New York called Testing does this really well. So they're targeting people on the autism spectrum pretty much exclusively. That tend to be people that we used to call on the Asperger's side are better at this job than people without autism. So they're looking for a particular kind of person. They don't call them in for a face-to-face interview for a job that will never require sitting across the table from someone and having an extended conversation. They give them games and challenges that are very close to the actual work they're hiring them to do, which makes all the sense in the world to me.
Yeah.
So I think part of our challenge is to help companies in other industries think of the same kinds of alternative assessments that they can try other than, a 30-minute conversation, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense. For some jobs it does, but for a lot of jobs it makes no sense at all.
Yeah, that's great. Are there other areas that you think would be really useful to tap into quickly? So we talked about employment and housing. Are there particular resources in the area of post-secondary education or community integration?
I should mention that what we used to do anyway, is we created a lot of toolkits and guides for different life stages for people with autism and their families. So we have these toolkits that you can find on our website, and every one of them are always free. An easy way to ask any question is to go to our autism response team. So there's a phone number. There's people that can answer in Spanish as well, and an email address that someone's going to be there and get back to you as quickly as possible.
Okay.
So we do have a post-secondary education guide, and it's the important thing to mention there, Terry, is that we know not everyone with autism is going to go to a 4-year university, and it's not the right place for everyone with autism. So the guide has these resources and lists of colleges and college programs that offer the traditional 4-year school, support program at schools like that, but then also community colleges and vocational schools and life skills programs and trade schools. I'm really interested in learning more this year about apprenticeships. I think apprenticeship, because we just, as we were just talking about, people with autism tend to do better learning by doing. I mean, that is apprenticeship. That is what human beings did for the vast, vast majority of our history. You didn't go to college, learn by doing the trade under a master, blacksmith or whatever. I think for people with autism, looking into apprenticeships programs and internships is similar too.
Yeah. Those
are great ways to kind of take a look, and not everyone has to go to a 4-year college to do that. So we have kind of the whole range of options in those toolkits and guides that I encourage everyone to take a look at.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah, one program I'm thinking of off the top of my head, Project Search, which is nationwide, is similar to the apprenticeship model. Are there any others you can think of?
Yeah, we know Project Search is probably the best at what they do. I love their model. That's a program that started in the hospitals. Cincinnati Children's Hospital was the first, but what we're seeing now is Project Searches in technology companies. And I happen to know of one that's going to start at a university, which is really cool. One apprenticeship program I do know about that's not gotten a whole lot of press as being designed for people with autism. I just happen to know some people who are really good in this field who are looking at this apprenticeship program. It's called the AHIMA Foundation, and it's their registered HIM apprenticeship program. So if you think about, there's so much work that needs to be done on digitizing all health records, on how much data there is in our healthcare, insurance, doctor's bills, hours and hours of work, coding for hospitals, data entry and analysts and stuff like that. So HIMA Foundation is this organization, I guess, that's funding an apprenticeship program in this field to try and build the field out. And I happen to know someone who is an autism dad in that group and really making sure that people with autism are included. So, I think we'll see some stories come out of this industry and this apprenticeship program. And what I hope to see is other apprenticeship programs get started.
That's awesome. Yeah. I know we can kind of go all day. There are so many great programs out there. What would be the best way for folks who are interested in learning about more of these initiatives to follow Autism Speaks, either on social media or on your website? Can you give us some of those links?
Yeah, sure. So the homepage for Autism Speaks is www.autismspeaks.org. You can find more adults if you go to autismspeaks.org/family-services/adults. I manage Facebook and Twitter accounts for the Spectrum Careers. So that's all focused on employment. I also manage the Facebook page for a group called Advancing Futures for Adults with Autism. And so that's a lot of news and resources related to all the topics we talked about today. And another opportunity that I think about, Terry, that I hope is useful is we started 2 networking groups on LinkedIn. It's really simple. It's just a way for people to find one another and to share the latest happening and to try and connect with people. So there's one that's dedicated to employment. It's called the Autism Employment Network, powered by Autism Speaks. And the other one is Housing by Autism Speaks. I want people to know that you do need to request to join, but I accept everybody. The only reason we kept it a private group is so that anyone can ask any question they want without any fear of it being, turning up somewhere else or being found by a Google search. So that's the only reason why these are kept as private groups. They're really just wide open for anyone to ask questions or to connect with one another and what each other is doing.
That's great. Yeah, I can attest to those LinkedIn groups being really valuable. Davey posts some really awesome articles and information. It's just a great way to really get information out there about the different businesses that are springing up that are looking to employ individuals with autism, different housing models, just a whole range of things. So it really keeps people in touch with the latest news. So thanks so much for providing that as a resource for us.
It's my pleasure, and thanks for that comment. I'm so glad you find it helpful.
Yeah, I really do. Okay. So you are doing tons of incredible things over at Autism Speaks. Any last things to share with the Autism Quality of Life community?
Right. I know, Terry, you had asked a while ago for something to end on. And, one is kind of it's a cop out, but it's a great one. And Dr. Stephen Shore is a great guy, and he's one of our board members of Autism Speaks. So, obviously, if you met a person with autism, you've only met one person with autism. Mm-hmm. You have to keep in mind always the wide variety of skills and abilities and interests and challenges of our community when we try and work on these different solutions and keep everyone in mind, which can be difficult at times. But the one quote that I do really like is from Alan Turing, of the first computer, who helped break Nazi code in World War II. And it wasn't necessarily about autism specifically, but he really is someone who I think many people agree is on the autism spectrum. He said, "No one can imagine anything of who do the things no one can imagine." And I just love seeing employers who we work with kind of have their minds open to the myths and the underestimation they have of people with autism, and how their minds are open when they meet someone on the spectrum and they really see what they're capable of. Sometimes the people we expect the least of, we're so impressed by.
Yeah, that's great. I really think that we're in the middle of such a culture shift here and starting to think about including all these individuals who are aging into adulthood, and that we're really going to see some changes in the way we think about employment and just the entire system. So this is really an exciting time.
I agree. I think we are at kind of a great time right now for our community. You're right.
So thanks so much, Dave, for coming on the podcast. It was really a pleasure to chat with you and to learn more about what's going on at Autism Speaks.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Thank you for inviting me. And again, thanks for hosting the show on such a great topic and important topic to our community.
Thanks so much. All right. Looking forward to sharing all these resources and to getting the word out there about these exciting programs, and look forward to speaking with you soon.
Me too, Terry. Thanks again.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for listening to today's show. We had our special guest, Dave Kearon from Autism Speaks for Autism Awareness Month. And so I realized that the sound quality in this episode wasn't perfect, so we might have cut off on some key words and where we were mentioning individuals or services. So please come visit us at our website so that we can share more of that information and you won't miss a thing. And that's www.autismqualityoflife.com/autism-innovators. If you're not already part of our community on Facebook, we'd love to connect with you there at www.facebook.com/QOL4ASD. If you know of any guests who you think would be perfect for the show, or you just want to reach out, send me an email at autismqolpodcast@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next time.